It is that time of the month, my friends. Welcome to the Mere Mortals book reviews, and in particular, the Mere Mortals recap of the month for September 2022. My name is Kyrin, host of the Mere Mortals podcast, but in this episode of the book reviews, we're going to have a little exploration of all the books that were added to the book reviews channel this month, and then also just add some additional thoughts onto some things that might not have made it into the actual book review, see what's coming up, and also do some thanking of people for supporting the show because this is a value for value show. Without further ado, let's jump into it. The first and best one that I read from this book from this month was The Sound of Waves by Yukio Mishima. I gave this a 7.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed this book for its simplicity, and that is one of the things that jumped out at me as being kind of unique about it in a way. It was just so bare bones and raw, but the Mishima has a real beautiful way with words. I've only read 2 of his books so far, so this one and The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. And I definitely intend to read more because I do like his style. One thing, though, about simplicity that did make me go, oh, okay, this is definitely doesn't map onto real life was there was this one scene where he finds this perfect way to pacify Chiyoko in the moment. So he's getting onto this boat. It's just about to leave shore. And she kind of comes to him and is kind of tear-stricken saying, I'm the one who told about your secret. It's my fault all of this happened, and it's because I'm so ugly, blah, 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 blah. And she has this real deep-seated kind of disgust with herself because she believes she's ugly. And Shinji, in the moment, the boat's just about to leave. He has maybe 5 seconds to say something. And he says the perfect combination of words that kind of unlocks her heart and she now is able to go, oh, I'm not ugly. I'm actually beautiful. And this kind of simplicity of finding the exact right thing to say absolutely does not map onto my life. I always seem to find that it's the small offhand comments like that where it's a small little thing to say. It opens the can of worms. It makes things way, way worse. So usually it's kind of a small negative thing instead of a big positive thing that comes from these. So that one was where I went, okay, maybe that happens for other people, but for me it's the opposite, both in terms of what I tend to do to other people and what other people tend to do to me. It's those small innocuous comments that can kind of dig in and go like root into your brain. And that's the thing that stays rather than it becoming this unlocking, wonderful, magical thing, which would maybe happen more from a deep discussion of really, creating boundaries and having a huge discussion on a particular point of, soreness or something like that in a relationship or things like that. So yeah, that was one where I was like, I'm not sure about that. And I did enjoy thinking about, could you ever find certainty through purely intellectual routes? And this is why I was saying that one of Shinji's kind of main characteristics was perseverance. So continued steady belief in spite of opposition. And I think there is actually something about the grind of physical reality of doing something hard in real life in a kind of physical labor sort of sense. So whether this be an exercise or a hobby of some sort that requires intense concentration, it could be your job of lifting heavy things, moving things, of moving your body in a certain way, dance, for example, any of these sort of things. I think there's a grounding in a physically arduous pursuit. And if you want some more details on this, I'd suggest checking out episode 336 of the Mere Mortals podcast. So it won't be out yet, but I'm going to explain more about kind of some life philosophies. And this is one of the things that I actually find quite deeply. And so more explanations there. The second book of the kind of favorite list was On the Beach by Nevil Shute. I gave that a 7 out of 10. You will notice in that book review that there was a lack of quotes and there was a lack of me actually picking up the book and holding it to the screen. And that was because I had some laptop issues, and although it didn't particularly affect this channel, I had previously recorded that book review and with the book in front of me, and did the quotes as normal and whatnot. But because I lost the audio of that, I couldn't use the camera audio. It's too shitty. So I had to redo that one later on, and I didn't have access to the book because I'd already returned it to the library. So you will note that from there. I definitely had that vacillation between thinking, is this how people would behave or not? I don't know. Once again, I actually asked Juan on this on the Mere Mortals podcast, and that was another of the episodes that got lost, unfortunately. So those thoughts will have to remain in my own mind and not and not spread out to the world unless I ask it again some other day. But I would recommend this book for thinking about death in a different way. So you can get kind of death thinking related to Stoicism. There's a fair bit about that, such as negative visualization. I think that's a very handy psychological technique that you can use to contemplate your own mortality. You could read books, Mortality by Christopher Hitchens, someone who is dealing through cancer and how they behave. You can, I suppose, do it through religion in many different ways. But this book presented death in a way that I hadn't particularly thought of before, and I found it quite useful. In fact, so I would encourage reading of that book if you are wanting to get a new perspective on death, for example, and even on your own life and how you could find satisfaction in your own life. I think that's a decent book for that. Now, this book review is actually not out yet. It will come out in several days, but The Stranger by Albert Camus. I definitely found it robotic at first, but I came to understand that, this is a different person, and so I would definitely recommend it's a short book. It's a very short book, and so I would definitely recommend getting through that kind of 10%, 20%, even 30% range mark, and then I think you'll kind of unlock like, oh, okay, this is a character who's got his mind works in a different way than kind of normal people, I guess. So. I would definitely recommend, if you're struggling right at the start, to kind of push through a little bit, because I think you can get some benefits for that. That being said, I still gave it a 6 out of 10 because it just nothing particularly hit home to me from this book. And I actually haven't done the book review yet, so I don't want to speak too much about things because I'll probably be repeating myself. But I did find it funny how some people it'll be kind of their favorite book, and I'll talk more about who this was and why I actually read this book in the support section of the Boostagram Lounge. But the difference between having similar tastes of genres as a whole, but one really standing out and one not between different people, I find that so weird. Like, how is it that we don't just love the same book and all of the same books? I do find that funny. But I guess that's just getting into, aspects of your whole life, and one particular thing that a character did is maybe something that you did as a child, and that just really connects with you. So yeah, that was a decent book, but not one I will rave about. This one, I'm not going to even bother doing a book review on, but I did read it, which was James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time. How many pages is this? It's 89 pages in pretty large typescript, so I think it took me an hour and a half to read, maybe. It was a book from a different era, and I can see how it would have been impactful, but I'm so far removed from it. So this was published in, let me quickly jump to here. So it was first published in 1963, and it's definitely got an American context because it has this, it's basically talking about an African-American or Negro, and as he says many times in the book, and their kind of struggle to get civil liberty. So this was right in the civil rights movement. I think it was kind of a big impetus for people behind it, and it's just so far removed from me. I'm here in Australia, so we don't have the racial tension that they do of African Americans and the kind of whites. And we, if anything, it would be between white people here and Asians, I guess, because that's more the predominant minority, I guess you'd get here. But there was never any slavery aspect here. Maybe some slight bit of Australian Aborigines, for example. But it's just there's so many different contexts behind this, which just made me go. And here's a quote from the back: "We, the black and the white, deeply need each other here if we are really to become a nation." I've never seen the world in terms of I'm a white guy and there's black guys over there. That's just not how I've envisioned the world. And whilst there is obviously there was a lot of bad things happening in that time, and it's really a story about how he tried to escape the oppressiveness of just life in general, and how you couldn't get ahead if you were a black guy because there would always be a kind of ceiling cap. You couldn't rise into these positions. It wasn't based on merit. It was based on your skin color and things like this. And so he became a pastor. He became disillusioned with that, especially after seeing how other pastors were just basically getting money, enriching themselves off of the black people that they were trying to help, their fellow citizens. And he was kind of consorting with the Nation of Islam, and that's where they were pretty radical in talking about how they needed to rise up, that America actually belongs to the blacks, the brown people, I guess. I'm not even sure the exact terminology they used, and how this would galvanize a nation, how this not galvanize, how they should take over the nation, how whites are actually it was that reverse racism where it's we're the black people, we're better than the whites and that sort of thing. It just didn't connect to me. So I gave it a 3 out of 10. There was a mix of anger, pride, outrage, sadness, religiosity. He was it felt like angry rambling, which, whilst justified, was kind of inaccurate in its final conclusions of what should be done, perhaps, and how life should look afterwards. And I don't know if he would look at how America is today and think that things had improved or not. I honestly don't know. But yeah, it was just a book too far removed from me. I did prefer more ones like The Invisible Man by Ralph Emerson. I think that connected with me more. A book from a similar time period, but just told in a much better way and had a much more interesting story. And it made me feel the injustice, whereas this made me just look at a kind of angry and embittered man in many ways. But yeah, there we go. That was my book review right there. And the final one, which was done by Juan, was Ego is the Enemy, and he gave this 7.5 out of 10. So he's continuing on his Ryan Holiday kick and on Stoicism, which I approve of. I think Stoicism is definitely one of the best philosophies that I've certainly come across. And I feel like I might have even read this before a long time ago, because I think I have read some Ryan Holiday books. So yeah, it definitely did make me reminisce on going like, yeah, I think this was a good one. Juan seemed to enjoy it. There's I think a somewhat of a maturity you get to reading these sorts of things, and to understanding more about how people from a long time ago dealt with the exact same problems, just minus the technology, and how they psychologically got through things. I think there's a lot to be gained from that. And putting it in a modern context is definitely good, because you can get versions of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, which are almost unreadable. And that could be because of their it's been translated from what he certainly wasn't writing in English back in the 200 BC or AD or that time period that he was writing in. I can't remember when he was born exactly. But yeah, there's definitely things to be learned from that, is all I'll say. So with all that being said, we'll get into the Boostagram Lounge, and there's a couple of people I want to thank for showing some support. And of course, my pre-approved wallet thing that I had set up here showing all the Boostagrams has disappeared. Very good. So I will just explain, first of all, then why I read The Stranger. And this was because I was checking out, and I've kind of formed a connection with a lady called Anastasia Safronova, who has a Instagram channel called @books_I_read_daily. So books I read daily. And yeah, we seem to have very similar tastes, and her recommendation, she absolutely loved this book. I read Camus not too long ago with the plague and also the trial before that. And yeah, I definitely appreciate how this book really connected with her. And for me, it was kind of like, yeah, it's okay. So that's a little bit of a shame, but also to be expected. You can't enjoy every single book to the same extent that other people do. So there we go. So getting on to the Boostagrams themselves. The first one was actually from me for doing a little test using the Albi wallet. So definitely a cool little thing to use if you want a real simple way to be able to start Boostagramming. Getalbi.com, and you can spin up a Lightning wallet in no time at all and start boosting the Mere Mortals and Mere Mortals book reviews. That would be absolutely awesome. And they have a connection with Podverse. So if you use Podverse and you want to donate to the show or support to the show, if you go into the settings in there, you can create a wallet yourself in the actual Podverse app. So very cool. We have one here from Peter the Slav, and he sends through a whopping amount of 32,673 via Fountain. Wow, thank you, Peter. And he says, I really enjoyed this journey you did into classic philosophy. I really got the sense you gave it a fair shake and really wanted to really like the works, but just couldn't in the end. I think I would have came to the same conclusion. So a big thank you for saving me some valuable time to mainly listen to some more podcasts. My pleasure, Peter. My pleasure. And yeah, I was discussing this recently with another friend of mine, Brendan, from the Mere Models Conversations. He's been on there 4 times, and he came up with a good point related to philosophy, which was just there's so much of it is kind of it's almost social drama. Niche could only exist without other philosophers, and so there's all this kind of building upon other people, and that kind of like I didn't need that drama. I don't need to know what Niche thinks about other philosophers. When I was thinking about philosophy, I was really wanting to dive into the nature of reality and perhaps uncover some truths I'd never found before. And most of these seemed like, yeah, maybe there was some truthful things in what they were saying, but it wasn't presented in a way which was accessible. It wasn't presented in a way that was relevant to my time period and the life that I'm living at the moment. And, sometimes a modern interpretation of things can be better than the original. It might be better to read Ryan Holiday's books rather than go into the actual Stoics themselves. Just because it's the original or just because it's the older version doesn't necessarily make it the better one, which was something I had kind of been using as a rule of thumb, which I might have to adjust my position on, because there is something about the filtering mechanism of time. Older works equal better work. I think there is something to that, but it can't be applied in all cases as well. So I'm glad I saved you some time, my friend. He also sends through another 4,901 small test boost. Software bugs are the enemy, and that was for the ego as the enemy. The one before was for the Either Or by Søren Kierkegaard. Not sure how you pronounce that in Danish. Software bugs are the enemy, and I know a lot about that. And hardware bugs as well. And then the final one, which was, I believe this is a new name, I'm not sure I've seen this before, was at Crypto Senas. And he just says, interesting, sends through 67 sats for Ego as the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. And we definitely did have some streaming going on as well, but that's a little bit harder to find. From JSRPR178, from another user 171. So everyone, thank you for supporting the show like that. I really do appreciate that. And I'll get onto the value for value section after what's coming up. So coming up in October of 2022, we've got a couple of books. Ones which the names will ring a bell. Sobre Heróis y Tumbas. I'm still making my way through that gradually in Spanish. It's just taking time. It's kind of I'm kind of picking it up once every 5 or 6 days and giving it a read. So it is a thicker book, and it's in Spanish. So it does take me my reading pace is not as quick. But I am making my way through that, and maybe it'll be the last. If it comes out in October, it'll be probably the last review of the month. I'm also reading Patrick White's Voss at the moment, which is kind of an Australian classic, and it's actually about a German guy in it, which is kind of cool because I'm learning German at the moment, so I'm seeing like this little connection, which is nice. And I've just got a whole stack of books. I know Juan is reading something from David Goggins, like Can't Stop Me, I think is what that's called. So that will probably be coming out as well. And yeah, not much more philosophy, probably going to just be a mix of, I don't know, whatever I feel like. Fun things. I've got some more recommendations for some Russian works from Nastya. And yeah, there's, I don't know. Whatever it is, it's going to be more enjoyable than some of the books that I've read previously. And to sum this up, value for value. This is a value for value show. I spent a lot of time making the video, making the audio, reading all these books, doing the reviews for you, giving you topics, I think some themes that you could perhaps take out for yourself or have an examination of whilst reading, or not read the book, give you a summary like I did for Peter, save you some time. And I just request that you send that back, and that can come in many forms: time, talent, or treasure. Time, you could share this book review to another person who you think would get some value from this and say, hey, Mere Mortals book reviews, they're pretty damn awesome. You could also spend some time checking out the Mere Mortals podcast, where a lot of these themes are ones that Juan and I will explore deeper in a more conversational style, so very different from the kind of monologues that you get here. And the talent-wise, if you're a literary critic or something and you feel like I've missed some important points, I would love to know all of these things. If you have some suggestions on how the format of the show could be different, how it could be altered, maybe you want to know more details about the author and how that plays in with his writing style or things like that, yeah, Cal, shoot me some suggestions, some recommendations on how to make things better. I would love that. And then, of course, the treasure portion, which is things like Peter has done, things like Crypto Senas has done, which is sending through a payment of Satoshis. So this is a small portion of Bitcoin, can be a tiny, tiny amount, but every portion is appreciated. That's how I pay for the continued servicing of my laptop, of the hosting on different the podcast sites and the servers of everything that goes into this. And value for value. Just if you got value from this show, all I request is that you return it back in whatever way that you want to. So with all of that being said, my Mere Mortal lads, thank you for joining me to the very end, and I hope you're looking forward to some new books coming up for October, because I certainly am. Leave it there for today. Kyrin out.